I can't walk straight. What did you do to me? Alien woman's complaint. The Ascendant drifted silently through the black void of space, its sleek, advanced frame cutting through the stars like a cutting-edge spear. The ship, manned by a diverse crew of explorers, was on the cusp of making a discovery unlike any they had experienced before. Captain Ava Reyes stood at the helm, her sharp eyes scanning the star maps displayed on the holographic screens before her. She wasn't sure why, but something about this mission felt different. It wasn't the excitement of exploring new worlds or finding rare resources. It was the stillness of the system they were entering, a dead zone where no ships had ventured before. "Captain, we're approaching the vessel," Lieutenant Harris reported from his station. His voice broke the silence, bringing Reyes out of her thoughts. "Understood. Bring us into a safe orbit," Reyes responded, her voice steady but with a hint of excitement beneath it. This was it. Whatever lay ahead would shape the future of their mission, and possibly humanity's place in the universe. The crew had detected an old alien ship floating in the system. At first, there had been no signs of activity, no life signals, but the ship's design was unmistakably advanced, far beyond anything humanity had seen. It had been abandoned, but the Ascendant was the closest ship for light years, and they had an obligation to investigate. They had no idea what they would find. The alien vessel, a massive, black-hulled thing, seemed to shimmer faintly under the light of the nearby stars. It looked almost like a living organism, its surface covered in strange ridges and markings, as if it were part of something much greater than it appeared. There was a mystery there, something that called to them. As the Ascendant entered orbit around the ship, Dr. Lucas Bradley, the ship's xenobiologist, was already preparing his equipment to study whatever they found aboard. "Captain, I suggest we send a team inside immediately. If this ship is truly abandoned, we might be able to recover valuable technology or—" "Understood," Reyes interrupted, giving him a pointed look. "We're not here to loot alien artifacts, Dr. Bradley. First, we check for life signs." The crew readied themselves to board the alien vessel, and within minutes they were suited up and in the airlock. With their heart rates rising, they stepped onto the strange, metallic floor of the alien ship. It was cold, eerily quiet, and smelled faintly of something unfamiliar, a mixture of decay and burnt metal. Their flashlights flickered as they explored the dark corridors. "What happened here?" Lieutenant Harris muttered under his breath, his voice bouncing off the strange walls. There was no sign of life, but there was also no sign of destruction. The ship had simply stopped. It was as though the crew had vanished into thin air, leaving everything behind. "Keep your eyes open," Captain Reyes said firmly. "We don't know if this place is still hazardous. Stay alert." They continued down the winding corridors, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. Then, at the far end of a long hallway, they found it, a large, circular chamber, and in the center, lying on the floor, was a figure. The figure was humanoid but clearly alien. It was a woman, her skin shimmering in an unusual shade of deep violet, almost translucent, her features sharp and angular. She had long, flowing hair that glowed faintly, as if it was made of living starlight. There were strange tattoos running along her arms and neck, symbols no one on the crew could recognize. Her clothes were made of a material that seemed to blend with the walls, as if designed to match her surroundings. "Is she alive?" Harris asked, kneeling beside the figure. "Doctor." Bradley crouched down, carefully examining the alien woman. "Barely. Her vitals are weak. She's been unconscious for some time." "Can we help her?" Captain Reyes asked, her tone softening. The woman's life could be a bridge between humanity and an entirely new species, one they knew nothing about. "I think so," Dr. Bradley replied. "I've never seen anything like this before, but with the right tools, we might be able to stabilize her." The crew worked quickly, setting up a portable med bay to stabilize the alien woman. After several tense minutes, she began to stir, her eyes fluttering open. They were an intense, glowing green, and they darted around in confusion as she sat up quickly, gasping for breath. "Easy, easy," Captain Reyes said, holding up her hand in a calming gesture. "We're not here to hurt you. We're from the Ascendant, a human exploration vessel. You're safe now." The alien woman's eyes narrowed, and she looked at the humans with a mix of suspicion and disbelief. Slowly she stood up, her body swaying slightly as if it had forgotten how to balance. The crew watched carefully, unsure of what to expect next. "Who are you?" The woman's voice was low but commanding. It carried a forcefulness that suggested she was no stranger to authority. She looked at them, trying to make sense of the strange, small humans who surrounded her. "What have you done to me?" "We've helped stabilize your condition," Dr. Bradley explained cautiously. "You were in a coma of sorts. We found you on the ship in—" "Your vessel," she interrupted, her eyes growing wild with alarm. "What have you done to my body? My mind? I feel wrong." Captain Reyes stepped forward, trying to remain calm. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We just found you and—" "I can't walk straight," the alien woman hissed, her voice trembling with rage as she tried to take a step forward but ended up stumbling. She gritted her teeth and tried again, but it was clear her body wasn't responding the way it should. The crew stared, stunned. This was no ordinary alien. The strength and grace they had expected from someone of her species were gone. She was struggling to stand, her legs wobbling beneath her as if her body was no longer her own. "Just take it easy," Dr. Bradley suggested, stepping back. "It's possible that—" "Enough!" The woman's voice cut through the air, furious. "What did you do to me? I am Viora of the Vikarn, a warrior. I do not stumble like a child." Captain Reyes exchanged a glance with her crew. This was not how they had imagined their first contact with an alien species. Viora was clearly not someone used to being weak or vulnerable. She was a warrior, and now her body was betraying her. "I'm sorry," Reyes said carefully, "but we didn't do anything to hurt you. We don't know what's happening to you, but we're here to help." Viora's eyes flickered with distrust, but something in Rey's voice seemed to calm her, just a little. She slowly sank to her knees, her hands clutching the floor as though trying to steady herself. For a moment the room was silent, the only sound the quiet hum of the Ascendant's engines. "You don't understand," Viora muttered, her voice hoarse now. "I am a Vikarn warrior. I was the strongest. I could crush entire starships with my bare hands. But now," she trailed off, glaring at her own hands as if they had betrayed her. "We understand you're in pain," Captain Reyes said gently, her voice firm yet compassionate. "And we'll figure out what's going on. You're not alone anymore." But Viora was not ready to accept that. She wasn't ready to let go of her pride. "You've done something to me. I don't know what it is, but I will make you regret it." Her words hung in the air as the crew tried to process what was happening. They had hoped for a peaceful first contact, but instead, they were faced with an alien warrior who could barely stand, let alone fight. This was only the beginning. And none of them had any idea just how deep the consequences of their actions would go. Viora's anger simmered beneath the surface. But as the days passed aboard the Ascendant, she slowly began to realize that her situation wasn't going to improve by mere willpower alone. The human crew had done their best to accommodate her, but nothing seemed to ease the feeling of wrongness in her body. Her limbs no longer moved with the strength and precision she had once known, and every step she took felt like a battle to maintain control. Her new reality was unsettling. She had always prided herself on being a Vikarn warrior, feared, respected, and unmatched in battle. Yet now she could barely walk without stumbling. It wasn't just her legs that betrayed her. Her senses were overwhelmed, as though they were heightened to an unnatural degree. The lights aboard the ship felt too bright, the sounds too loud, and the slightest movements of the crew sent ripples through her mind. "I need to train," Viora said one morning, as she glared at the human crew who gathered around her. "I must regain control." Captain Reyes watched her closely, noting the alien woman's fierce determination. But there was something more beneath the surface, a struggle not just with her body but with herself. "We're not going to rush things, Viora. You've been through something no one on this ship can understand, but we'll help you." Viora's eyes narrowed, her body tense with frustration. "You don't understand. I am Viora of the Vikarn. I am a warrior. I do not need your help." Despite her words, it was clear that she was becoming desperate. Every day, Viora pushed herself harder. The crew could hear her training in the gym, her movements wild and uncoordinated as she attempted to regain her balance. Sometimes, she would shout in frustration, slamming her fists into the walls or the training equipment. The force behind her blows was still powerful, but it lacked the controlled precision of a true warrior. Dr. Lucas Bradley, the xenobiologist, was the first to suggest that the changes to her body might be more profound than anyone realized. "Captain, I've been reviewing Viora's scans. Her physical structure is, well, it's not what we expected. Her muscles, bones, everything seems to be adapting to the human environment. It's as if her body is evolving in real time." Captain Reyes listened carefully. "What do you mean, evolving?" "It's hard to say exactly," Bradley continued. "But the ship's technology, the life support systems, even the artificial gravity, it all seems to be triggering a change. It's almost as though her body is evolving beyond her species' natural limits." "She might be becoming something different," Reyes frowned. "So you're telling me that we didn't just save her life. We might have turned her into a completely new being." "Possibly, but there's more. Her strength is increasing, but it's not controlled. The more she pushes herself, the more her body tries to adapt, and sometimes it overcompensates. The human environment might be too much for her." Meanwhile, Viora was growing more frustrated by the day. She could feel the power building inside her, but she couldn't control it. Her enhanced senses were picking up everything around her, from the electrical hum of the ship's circuits to the heartbeat of every crew member. Every movement was amplified, every sound distorted. Her mind raced with energy, but her body couldn't keep up. It was like having a wild stallion inside her, and she couldn't hold the reins. One day, during a sparring session with Captain Reyes, the full extent of the transformation became clear. Reyes had been trying to train with Viora, hoping that some form of controlled exercise might help her regain her balance. But Viora, still struggling to control her heightened abilities, lashed out in frustration. Reyes blocked the first strike easily, her years of combat training coming into play. But when Viora tried to land another blow, something unexpected happened. Viora's strength surged uncontrollably, sending Reyes crashing into the wall. The sound of impact reverberated throughout the gym. "Captain," Harris shouted, rushing over to check on Reyes. The crew watched in shock as Viora stood over the fallen captain, panting heavily, her eyes wide with horror. I didn't mean to," Viora whispered, her voice trembling. Reyes slowly pushed herself off the floor, dusting off her uniform with a calm expression. "It's all right, Viora. We just need to work on controlling your strength." But Viora wasn't so sure. The power inside her felt like a force she could barely comprehend, let alone control. She had always been in command of her body, her mind, her strength. But now, it felt as though the very thing that had once made her unstoppable was now a curse. The days blurred together as Viora continued her training. With each passing hour, her strength grew, but so did the instability in her body. Her legs would tremble uncontrollably at times, and her once pristine movements would give way to erratic motions. One moment, she would feel stronger than she ever had in her life, and the next, she would find herself flat on the ground, unable to rise without the help of the crew. But it wasn't just her body that was changing. Her mind, too, was undergoing a transformation. Viora had always prided herself on her battle-hardened instincts, her ability to think quickly and decisively in the heat of combat. But now, her thoughts were sharper, faster, as if her mind was operating at a level far beyond what she had ever known. She could calculate movements before they happened, anticipate attacks, and analyze data at an incredible rate. It was exhilarating, but at the same time it felt like too much. One evening, as Viora sat alone in the ship's observation lounge, staring out at the stars, she began to reflect on the changes within her. She had never allowed herself to think about things like this. Her whole life had been focused on combat and victory. The idea of change, of evolving, was something she had always rejected, but now it seemed inevitable. She could feel her body shifting, her mind expanding, and she wasn't sure how to handle it. "I've lost control," she muttered to herself, her voice quiet in the empty room. But is it really a loss, or is it a new beginning? Her hand reached up, brushing against her neck, where the faint glow of her tattoos seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. It was as though the symbols had come alive, their meaning becoming clearer with each passing day. She could feel their power, their connection to the stars, to the very essence of the universe. And with it, she felt a growing sense of purpose. Maybe this was not just a transformation of her body. Maybe it was the transformation of everything she had ever known. Her people, the Vikarn, had always relied on brute strength and military dominance. But what if there was more to life than fighting? What if she could use these new abilities to achieve something greater, something beyond the violence and destruction of war? As she stood up and walked toward the observation window, her steps were no longer as erratic. There was still a slight tremor in her legs, but it was fading. Her mind was clear, focused. She was beginning to understand what was happening to her, not just on a physical level, but on a deeper, more profound level. "I may not be the same warrior I was," Viora said softly to herself, her voice filled with a strange new sense of resolve. "But perhaps that's what I needed to be, something more." Her eyes turned toward the stars again, and for the first time since waking on the Ascendant, she didn't feel angry or betrayed. She felt something else, hope. The transformation that had once seemed like a curse was beginning to feel like an opportunity, an invitation to something greater than herself. And whatever it was, she was ready to face it. Days turned into weeks as Viora continued her struggle to understand the changes happening to her body. The crew of the Ascendant had seen her frustrations grow, but also her quiet determination. At first, the alien woman had been full of anger and confusion, unwilling to accept her new reality. Now, however, there was a shift. Her body, once a tool of sheer power and precision, was slowly transforming into something far more unpredictable, and she had no choice but to learn how to control it. One afternoon, as Captain Reyes walked through the ship's corridors, she found Viora standing in front of a mirror in the crew quarters, her hands placed on the glass. The alien woman was staring at her reflection, her face expressionless, though her eyes told a different story. There was a quiet intensity in them, a mix of frustration, acceptance, and something else, something that Captain Reyes couldn't quite place. "How are you feeling?" Reyes asked gently, approaching Viora. Viora didn't turn to face her right away. She seemed lost in thought, as if the mirror held more answers than the captain could offer. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "I feel different," Viora admitted, her eyes never leaving her reflection. "Stronger, but not the way I used to be. It's like my body is changing in ways I don't understand." Reyes stepped closer, her gaze softening. "You're learning to adapt, Viora. It's going to take time, but you'll get there. We're all here to help." Viora turned toward her, and for the first time the captain saw something more than just the warrior in her eyes. There was vulnerability, something raw and unspoken. "I was once a soldier, a leader. My people, the Vikarn, respected me because of my strength. Now I can barely control my own movements." "You're still strong," Reyes said with a smile. "You just have to learn to use your new strength in different ways." Viora's jaw clenched at the idea. To her, strength meant dominance, control, and power, traits that were ingrained into every fiber of her being. The thought of adapting to something new, something human, felt foreign. Yet there was no denying the truth. Her abilities were changing, and if she didn't learn to manage them, they would continue to spiral out of control. The following day, Viora made the decision to train herself in a different way. She needed more than just brute strength. She needed control. She was no longer the unstoppable force she once was, but perhaps she could become something even more powerful, a force that was as intelligent as it was strong. The human crew, especially Dr. Lucas Bradley, had noticed how her senses had sharpened, her mind quickened. Perhaps these new abilities could be used to her advantage. "I need to test my limits," Viora told Captain Reyes, her voice no longer filled with anger but with a quiet resolve. Reyes raised an eyebrow but nodded. "All right, but let's start slow. No need to push too hard." Viora didn't respond, but the look in her eyes was enough to tell Reyes that she wasn't interested in taking things slow. The alien woman had always been a warrior, and now she was determined to become something more, something her people would never have imagined. Over the next few weeks, Viora immersed herself in training, but it wasn't the same kind of physical training she had done before. She had always relied on her sheer strength and endurance, but now she needed to focus on precision. Dr. Bradley helped her understand her enhanced senses, how the ship's artificial gravity affected her movements, how the ship's technology could be harnessed to strengthen her abilities. But it was up to Viora to learn how to control it. At first, she was clumsy. Her body felt out of sync, her reflexes too fast, her movements too powerful. One day, while practicing in the training room, Viora tried to perform a simple punch but ended up sending a piece of equipment flying across the room. The crew watched from the observation window, their faces a mix of awe and concern. "Easy there," Captain Reyes called from the doorway. "You're going to break everything if you're not careful." Viora's face flushed with frustration. She had been trying to focus, but her body felt like it was working against her. Every movement was a force of nature, yet it lacked the finesse she needed. She stepped back, breathing deeply, and closed her eyes for a moment. She wasn't going to give up, not after everything she had gone through. "Again," she muttered to herself. "This time I'll control it." This time her movements were slower, more deliberate. She focused on each step, each breath. The punch came out smoothly, a controlled movement that landed perfectly on the target. She could feel the power in her fist, but this time she was able to control it, to direct it exactly where she wanted. As Viora stood in the training room, sweat glistening on her forehead, she realized that the power wasn't just in her body, it was in her mind as well. The Vikarn had always relied on instinct, but now she could combine her instincts with thought, precision, and control. This was a new kind of strength, one that didn't require her to break everything in her path. Captain Reyes stepped into the room, a proud smile on her face. "That was impressive," she said. "You've come a long way, Viora." Viora wiped the sweat from her brow, her breathing steady now. "It's not enough," she said, her voice low but filled with determination. "I still need to master this. I can't let my power control me." Reyes nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You're getting there. But remember, Viora, you don't have to do this alone. We're all here to help you." Viora looked at her, her gaze softening slightly. "I know, but this is something I have to do for myself." In the days that followed, Viora's training became more focused. She started to harness her abilities with more precision, controlling the strength in her limbs, her speed, and her reflexes. Her senses were sharper than ever before, and she began using them to her advantage. The ship's layout seemed to be etched into her mind, and she could sense the slightest vibrations in the walls. Her ability to think quickly, to calculate moves and anticipate outcomes, made her even more dangerous than she had been before. Only now, it was a controlled, focused kind of power. The crew began to notice the changes in Viora. She was still a warrior, but she was something more now, something that blended the raw strength of her species with the sharp intellect of a strategist. She was beginning to lead with her mind, not just her fists. She was becoming a force not only because of her physical abilities, but because of her newfound understanding of control. But even as Viora grew stronger, she knew that there were challenges ahead. There were still moments when her power slipped beyond her control. There were still moments when her emotions threatened to take over, when she felt the old anger rise within her. But she was learning to manage it, to channel that energy into something more productive. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Viora sat in the ship's observation lounge again, looking out at the stars. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. It wasn't the peace of a warrior after battle, but the peace of someone who had learned to control the storm inside them. She was no longer a warrior in the traditional sense. She was something more, something new. "I'm not the same," she whispered to herself, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "But maybe that's exactly what I needed to be." And for the first time since her transformation began, Viora smiled. The future was still uncertain, but she was ready to face it. With her new strength, her new mind, and her new purpose, she was no longer the woman who had stumbled through the corridors of the Ascendant. She was something more, a new kind of power. And she was ready to use it. The stars outside the Ascendant flickered, their distant lights shimmering in the vast emptiness of space. Inside the ship, there was an air of anticipation. The crew had been working tirelessly, gathering data and preparing for what was to come. Viora, once a Vikarn warrior with unmatched strength, had evolved into something more, a force that blended intelligence, power, and control. She had learned to master her new abilities, transforming from a woman in pain and confusion into a woman who understood herself and the power she wielded. But now, the Ascendant was no longer a peaceful exploration vessel. A new threat had emerged, a Vikarn warship, hunting down Viora. The crew had detected the ship's approach a few hours earlier, and it was clear that Viora's past was coming back to haunt her. The Vikarn did not forgive traitors. And Viora, by leaving them and joining the humans, had sealed her fate. As Captain Reyes stood at the helm of the Ascendant, she could feel the tension in the air. The Vikarn warship, a massive vessel covered in sharp angles and dark plating, was closing in fast. The crew had done their best to avoid confrontation, but it seemed inevitable now. The ship was too close, and the Vikarn were relentless. "Viora," Reyes said, turning to the alien woman who stood at her side, her posture strong, her expression focused. "It's time." Viora nodded, her green eyes glowing with a mix of determination and calm. "I know," she said, her voice steady. "This is my fight." The crew had seen Viora's transformation firsthand. They had watched her grow stronger, more controlled, and more in tune with herself. She was no longer the angry, confused warrior they had first met. She had become a leader, a powerful being who could think, adapt, and overcome any obstacle. But now she had to face her past, her former people, and prove to herself that she had truly changed. As the Vikarn ship neared, the Ascendant began to brace for impact. The crew scrambled to prepare the ship for battle, but Captain Reyes knew that this wasn't going to be a battle of weapons alone. This was a battle of will, a test of everything Viora had learned and become. The humans had the technology, but Viora had the experience, the strength, and now the control to fight back. "Viora," Reyes said, walking over to her, "we're going to need you to take the lead on this. You know them better than we do." Viora met her gaze, her eyes filled with understanding. "I'm ready." The Vikarn warship loomed large on the screens, its weapons powered up and ready for combat. The Ascendant had no way to outrun it, but it could outmaneuver it. Viora, however, was their secret weapon. With her enhanced abilities, her sharpened senses, and her newfound control over her own power, she could turn the tide. As the first shots from the Vikarn warship struck the Ascendant, the ship rocked violently. The crew scrambled to maintain control, but Viora stood firm, her mind racing. The Vikarn were tactical precise, but they were predictable. They relied on brute force, and Viora had already adapted to that. "Captain," Viora said, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. "I can disable their weapons. Give me a moment." Reyes nodded quickly, signaling to the crew to focus on maneuvering the ship and avoiding further damage. Viora closed her eyes for a brief moment, focusing on the vibrations and energy waves that emanated from the Vikarn warship. Her enhanced senses allowed her to feel the pulse of the enemy's weapons, the flow of energy from their core systems. She could almost see the energy coursing through the ship, the weak points, the areas where she could strike. "I have it," Viora said, a small smile tugging at her lips, "targeting their power core." With a precise movement, Viora extended her hand, her fingers glowing faintly as she focused all her energy on the warship. She could feel the pressure building in her chest, but she pushed through it. Her mind was clear, focused on one thing, the weak spot in the Vikarn ship's energy grid. She reached out, not physically, but mentally, using her enhanced senses and the deep connection she felt to the ship's technology. In a moment of intense focus, Viora released a burst of energy, targeting the Vikarn warship's power core. The ship shook violently, and the enemy's weapons powered down, their shields flickering. The crew of the Ascendant gasped, watching in awe as Viora stood in the center of the bridge, her hand still extended. The Vikarn warship was momentarily disabled. "We've got a window," Captain Reyes shouted. "Move in now." The Ascendant quickly changed course, taking advantage of the temporary weakness in the Vikarn ship systems. The crew worked together, coordinating their efforts to avoid further fire from the enemy and to get in close. It was time to end this, but Viora knew that the battle wasn't over yet. The Vikarn would retaliate, and they would fight harder now. She could feel their fury in the air, an energy that resonated with her, reminding her of the warrior she had once been. But she was no longer that woman. She had changed. The Vikarn warship's weapons flared back to life, their energy shields rising to full power once again. But now Viora had the upper hand. She had learned to anticipate their moves, to read their strategy. She knew exactly what they would do next. "We need to disable their engines," Viora said, her voice steady and filled with purpose. "If we do that, they won't be able to chase us." Reyes gave a quick nod. "Do it." Viora's focus deepened as she once again reached out with her senses. She could feel the Vikarn warship's engines, the heat rising from the core, the flow of energy that powered their propulsion. She reached deeper, finding the exact spot where she could sever the connection and render the ship immobile. With a swift motion, Viora released another surge of energy. The Vikarn warship shook violently, its engines sputtering and then going dark. It was completely disabled, floating helplessly in space. The crew of the Ascendant breathed a collective sigh of relief as the immediate threat passed. The Vikarn ship, now powerless, was drifting in space, unable to pursue them any longer. Viora collapsed to her knees, her energy spent. Her body trembled, the strain of using her abilities taking its toll. But she had done it. She had faced her past and conquered it. She had proven to herself and to everyone else that she was no longer just a warrior. She was something more. She was a leader, a protector, someone who could change the course of events with her strength, her mind, and her control. "Viora," Captain Reyes said, her voice filled with pride. "You did it." Viora looked up at her, her breathing shallow but steady. "We did it," she corrected, her voice soft. "I didn't do this alone." The crew gathered around her, their faces filled with admiration and respect. Viora had not only saved them, but had proven that humanity was not as small or as weak as some alien species believed. In that moment, they were more than just survivors of a chance encounter. They were a team, and they had just overcome one of the greatest challenges of their lives. Viora stood up slowly, her strength returning. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "There's more to do, there's more to learn, and together we will face whatever comes next." As she looked out at the stars once more, Viora felt a new sense of purpose. She had once been a warrior, but now she was a force of change. And no matter what challenges the future held, she was ready to face them. With the crew of the Ascendant by her side, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Viora was no longer just a warrior. She was a new kind of power, and she would rise to meet whatever came her way.